Mr Loughton, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Pleasure, Mike.
Yeah, it's good of you to come on, and thank you very much indeed. It's a very, very important debate. May I just say that I've seen you named as a number of so-called Tory rebels, and that you are close to forcing Prime Minister Boris Johnson to put future lockdown measures to the vote. Is that correct? And what is behind that?
Well, I don't think I consider myself a rebel, but if anybody asks any sort of slightly awkward questions, you're automatically labelled a rebel. But there's a lot of Conservative MPs who are concerned about the way things are being done without proper questions being asked in Parliament. And we as MPs are there to represent our constituents. We're all getting hundreds of emails from constituents saying, does this mean I have to cancel my wedding? Can I go out with my children? We're having to face all these questions. We're in the front line with the constituents, and I think we just need more of an opportunity to be able to scrutinise these restrictions properly. They may be right, they may be not, but they are inconsistent in some cases, and we need to have a better opportunity to challenge the government. And that's why there's going to be a vote this week, and we're going to say, let's not just automatically renew all these powers. Let's have some safeguards that they can be properly debated in Parliament. We make proper, open, transparent, sensible decisions.
OK, so does that mean, Tim, because I don't understand the business of Parliament as well as you do, that if you put this amendment to a vote next Wednesday, can then the 10 o'clock close down, which has been arbitrarily imposed, be lifted?
Well, it won't automatically be, because what the vote's asking is that we're going to renew the emergency powers, but subject to the government holding debates and votes in Parliament when various key things come up. And actually, a lot of the things that the government's doing have not been done under the Coronavirus Emergency Act, which we passed when there really was an emergency 6 months ago. It's been done under the Public Health Act, which was passed back in 1984. I think the point, Mike, here is, and I raised it when the Prime Minister made his statement all about the new measures earlier in the week, that if people had a clearer understanding and a clearer explanation of why we need to bring in certain regulations and what impact that will have, and then a report back a few weeks later to say, because we brought this in, actually we've kept the infection rate down, or now we can ease up on places like Bolton or whatever, I think people will be much more happy to go along with it because they understand it. I think at the moment, a lot of people, including MPs, some things seem to be a bit illogical. Some things seem to be sort of contradicting each other. And people just want to understand exactly why we have to do things. And if they did, then I think people would comply. And we need everybody to comply if we're going to get through this. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, look, I accept that this has never happened before in sort of peacetime Britain, and that obviously Boris Johnson got in with a smashing 80-seat majority, expected a fairly comfortable ride through the next 5 years of Parliament, I would say, and then bang, gets whacked in the face by a pandemic. But I think what a lot of people are worried about is how he's reacted to that and whether or not he's bearing up to it. We all know that, of course, he was dreadfully ill himself. But the situation in Parliament last week was quite extraordinary, where Mr Johnson one day reads out, the instructions about, new clampdowns and all that. The next day, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr Rishi Sunak, stands up, tells everybody, live without fear, and actually introduces an element of optimism about, how we can, don't worry, I'm still looking after the economy. Now, that seems to me to be the wrong way around. And what worries me, Tim, is that maybe we're listening to too much science and not taking enough notice of the damage to the economy, and should the Chancellor have a bigger voice? And that's a fair point. And I don't think actually there was anything really contradictory between what Boris announced and then what Rishi came up with, which was, and I think the real star throughout this has been the support measures for business, which have really saved so many jobs, which Rishi Sunak has come up with very quickly and very practically. And I think that's been an absolute godsend. But look, this is a difficult balance. It's between lives and livelihoods. And there's obviously a real fear as well that by the concentration on COVID, and the NHS has done a fantastic job to make sure it wasn't overwhelmed when we had those very large numbers earlier in the year, and we could have them back again if we're not careful. But at the same time, a lot of people who had to postpone routine operations or have fallen back on cancer treatment and things like that, then actually there's an impact on people's lives beyond COVID. And we've got to get this balance right. And at the same time, if people lose their jobs, businesses fall, the economic impact on the nation is going to be huge, and that's going to impact on people's health and mental health and everything as well. It's a really, really difficult balance, which is why it's so important that things are properly explained so people can really understand the trade-off between more restrictions and actually making sure people have still got jobs later on and people are still alive later on, and we get through this pandemic and it doesn't go on and on and on and on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You see, I don't think people understand the damage that is being done to the economy. Most of the people who are advocating more restrictions seems to work in the public sector. And most people who have to get up in the morning and go out to earn money, like White Van Man and, you know, people in the Red Wall constituencies in the north and northwest of England, I think they're looking at it from two completely different points of view. I wonder whether, sorry to have interrupted you there, Tim, I wonder whether we should give back our citizens an element of their own control, and then they make up their mind whether they want to go out and put a mask on and stay 2 metres from people and go into work without having to be told by the government how to behave.
Well, if you remember early on, Boris made very clear that, look, everybody needs to do their bit and we're going to rely on the great British common sense.
Yes.
And that saved us going into the more extreme lockdown measures that we saw in many other countries. I remember a time in France, you needed a permit to travel outside your home. Yeah. You know, there are still in Spain, you have to wear a mask wherever you go, not just in shops, but actually out on the street. So we have avoided some of the more extreme measures that people might take offence and wouldn't comply with. And it's got to be a balance, again, between measures that people will go along with. And if you're too extreme, people will say, you know, blow that, I'm just not going to comply. And there's a real problem at the moment. You're sitting on a tube or on a bus, and there's a couple of people not wearing a mask, and so the evil eye stares on those people. Are they doing it because they genuinely are exempt because they've got a medical condition, or are they just not doing their bit? So if we left it up to everybody just to do exactly what you want, I think there will be a lot of resentment. We just need everybody to abide by the rules, and the more people we do, the greater we can limit the spread of the infection, and the sooner we'll get through it. And you know, that's got to be a combination of common sense, but actually some basic rules that people have to follow. And if they don't follow, then they need to be penalised.
Right. Okay. Fine. Tim, thank you very much for your time. Just before you go, you work in the same building as the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. There's been a lot of speculation about how he is. Whether he's still suffering from the after effects of COVID-19, whether he's overwhelmed by the situation. You know, some domestic issues in his private life have been tittle-tattled about. I mean, how do you see the Prime Minister as operating in the midst of this crisis? He
was in a really good form. I mean, he was quite bouncy the other day. And you know, whatever you think about Boris Johnson, he's a very optimistic, punchy, charismatic character. Yeah. And you know, he almost died a few months ago. Yeah. It was touch and go. So many people, and I know several people who've had the illness who're still feeling pretty lousy on the back of it. Yes. And he has got a punishing schedule. He hasn't just got COVID to try and sort out. He's got Brexit to sort out, and everything else that's going on. He's got a new kid, and yet he's still getting up early in the morning, going running and running the country. Yeah. I think he's doing remarkably well physically in that respect. So no, I think not many people will be able to do the job he's doing at the moment. Whether you like the job he's doing at the moment, he's actually putting everything into it. Well,
I'm very pleased to hear that you're so optimistic about the fact that he can get through this, you know, and he's not suffering, because that's what we need at the moment, leadership. Sure. And the leadership is all important, making the right decisions. Tim Loughton, thank you very much indeed, Conservative MP for East Worthing and Shoreham.